right, so the Detroit Pistons are officially back. As of last night, they officially clinched a top 6 spot within the Eastern Conference. So they're not going to be scrambling for a playoff spot by participating in the play-in tournament. They are literally in the playoffs. One thing that I love to see, and this is like a trend with Pistons teams throughout the course of NBA history, really since like the late 80s, whenever the Pistons are back to being really good, 9 out of 10 times, or maybe 10 out of 10 times, it's because they're returning to their defensive culture and defensive identity. When the Pistons are good, a lot of times, one of the biggest drivers behind that is their defense. What does that mean? This franchise has one of the best cultures out of the entire league. Flat out, when the team is back to playing well, we can always attribute it to their ability to defend at a high level. It was like that with those late 80s teams. It was like that with those early 2000s teams. And I'm not saying that this particular Pistons group is a contender, but they are back to being a legitimate threat out east. And a lot of it is due to their ability to defend at a high level. Since January 1st, start of the new year, they are arguably one of the 3 best defensive groups in the entire league. They're playing at an extremely high level on that end. They're back to hanging their hats on their defensive ability. And it's not just their defense, but how guys are fitting on the offensive end. I've talked about this before, and I really did talk about this in the offseason in a video that I put out about this team. Their focus on putting spacing around Cade Cunningham massively benefited the offense. They were one of the worst 3-point shooting teams last season. They didn't even get up a number or a large number of attempts last season. That's not an ideal situation for a point guard like Cade, who can play make at a high level. You want to make sure you're putting spacing around a guy like him. And this offseason, they emphasized on getting spacing around him by getting Malik Beasley, Tobias Harris, guys like that, Tim Hardaway Jr., and it has made this offense great as well. So amazing offseason work here from the Pistons, not even just the roster stuff, but also JB Bickerstaff coming in and once again showing this ability to help take a developing group to the next level. He did that with Cleveland. I know he got fired from that team where they let him go and went a different direction, but he needs a lot of credit for what he did with that squad by helping them get on track and actually being a legitimate threat out east. And he's doing it very similarly here with this Detroit Pistons squad, getting them a spot in the Eastern Conference playoffs, a very competitive and wide open Eastern Conference. And then I can't talk about him enough, Cade Cunningham, early on in his career, first overall draft pick, was injured a few times, kind of inconsistent with his availability. So a lot of people kind of forgot about how good Cade was, and his hype was kind of outshined by other number 1 overall draft picks in the years following him. So Paulo Banchero, Victor Wembanyama, when those guys kind of came into the league, we almost forgot about Cade a bit. But this season, he is reminding us that he has potential to be a top 5 player in this league. If you ask me, he is 100% an All-NBA guy this season. I think he's around that 3rd team right now. An amazing year for him, just reminding us why he was a number 1 overall draft pick, reminding us why we looked at him as a transcendent player during his draft class. And he's just been amazing, living up to the expectations this season. And I think generally Cade has lived up to the expectations through his entire career, but for the first time, the wins and the team results are matching up with his individual performance. Without a doubt, this is one of the better franchise single season turnarounds that we've ever seen. We all remember how bad things were looking for the Pistons just last season. They went on this historically bad losing streak where we were literally just watching them on League Pass, waiting to see how many games in a row they could lose and how much they could push that all-time record. They go from that to being a real threat out east. Again, one of the best turnarounds that we have ever seen. It got me thinking, I did some research. What are some other amazing NBA single season team turnarounds that we've seen throughout the course of league history? And where does this one stack up with some of those other ones that I'm gonna mention here a bit later? Let's start with the 2008 Celtics. They went from being a 24-win team to being the top seed in the East in that 2008 season and ended up winning a championship after bringing in Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen in that offseason. Then we also have the 1998 Spurs. They won 20 games the prior season, then turned that around to 56 wins the next year. Also had one of the best defenses in the entire league. I believe they sat around the 2nd spot in defensive rating that year. Tim Duncan emerged as the rookie of the year and one of the best up-and-coming young players in the NBA. Ultimately, they lost in the second round of the West playoffs, but this did set the stage for them becoming one of the premier teams in basketball through the late 90s onward. One of my favorite, the 2002 Nets. So that offseason, they acquired Jason Kidd, picked up some notable young pieces like Richard Jefferson from Arizona, and immediately went from being a bad team to a legitimate contender. They made the NBA Finals, ultimately lost in that final series in a sweep against the Lakers. But again, massive turnaround from being a bad team with just 26 wins the previous year to actually being a real contender. And they turned that into 2 consecutive NBA Finals appearances. Another brief one I'm gonna mention here, the 1980 Celtics. This was Larry Bird's rookie year. They improved from being a 29-win team the previous season to winning 61 games and getting all the way to the conference finals before losing to the Eastern Conference powerhouse 76ers. And obviously we know this set the stage for the Celtics becoming one of the biggest dynasties throughout the 1980s. Now, each of those turnarounds happened in different ways, right? So if you're looking at the 2008 Celtics or you're looking at the 2002 Nets, those 2 turnarounds primarily happened because some massive transactions were made in the offseason where teams are making these additions by bringing in these all-star level players. It's different from this Pistons situation because Detroit did make some offseason moves a bit more on the margins, like guys like Malik Beasley and Tobias Harris aren't all-star players, and they do help with specific niche things. Most of their turnaround was due to development, health, and a change in coaching philosophy. So each of those turnarounds that I mentioned happened in different ways. What makes the Pistons situation very unique is their core of young guys still intact. They made some moves on the margins and made some solid roster additions, but not like these massive all-star additions like some of these other teams that I mentioned on that list. But that's what sets this Pistons turnaround apart from some of the other ones that we've seen throughout the course of NBA history. So now your next question is, what is the ceiling for this Pistons team come playoff time? To be honest, if I'm putting money on it, maybe first round and out, but if there is any point in time for a team like Detroit where they're young, relatively playoff inexperienced to make a large playoff run, it would be now. The NBA is wide open. I say this every single time on each and every one of my videos. If there's any time for a young group to make an impactful run in the postseason, now is the time. And I think the Pistons have a very unique culture and approach to the game where they could end up potentially surprising some people out in the playoffs this time around. Again, I'm not putting money on them making like an Eastern Conference Finals appearance or whatever, but we just saw the Pacers make the East Finals last season. Who knows what could happen in the playoffs right now. But all in all, regardless of what happens in the playoffs this year, amazing stuff from Detroit being able to turn this franchise completely around to being a real trustworthy squad out East. The hope is that they can stay consistent and make this a real thing season in and season out. We'll see, but I love what they've been doing. Love JB Bickerstaff's approach with his changing coaching philosophy and again, his ability to really reach and work with younger players and younger teams. And we'll see what they're able to do come postseason time once it rolls around in a couple of weeks here.